Councilmember Flynn, if you have a question, go ahead, please.
No, Madam President, actually comments. I called this out for a vote earlier today, so I wanted to discuss why I'm voting no on publication. While this proposal has been through a lot of thought and development, I don't believe it's well structured. It's not likely to produce the results that we want. First, this city has never done a complete and comprehensive educational campaign among our customers on how to recycle or compost and divert from their trash bins. We shouldn't even be thinking about imposing fees to supposedly incentivize people to do something that is unclear to them on how to do it. How about giving people very clear tutorials on what goes in the green bin, what goes in the purple bin, what then goes in the black bin, and seeing the result? Second, even with sparse public education on this, our customers in the residential trash program already are doing much of what we ask of them. No constituent has ever asked me for weekly recycling, but my office has helped them upgrade their purple carts to the 95-gallon size, and in many cases to get a second recycling cart. It is a waste of money and resources, not to mention harmful to the environment, to have to buy twice as many recycling trucks to drive this entire city every week instead of every 2 weeks for weekly recycling, when in most cases we'll be collecting only half every week instead of the full carts every other week. We heard in committee 2 weeks ago that the Solid Waste Division workforce currently has a 28% vacancy rate, and that's down from a 35% workforce shortage in January. At that rate of hiring, it would take until January 2024 to get up to 100% even for the current program today, without accounting for having to hire 22 more workers to go to weekly recycling. And we heard in public comment earlier this evening how our crews are struggling to maintain even the current schedule. We should not be charging for service that we cannot yet provide today. Save the money and the carbon footprint by sticking with bi-weekly recycling, by deploying 95-gallon purple carts or second carts to households that need them. Third, our residential solid waste collections make up only 18% of what goes to the landfill from this city. Fully half of what gets dumped comes from construction and demolition activities. The other 32% comes from these large multifamily complexes and commercial and retail disposal. I showed the committee 2 weeks ago the photos I took of the dumpsters in the many apartment complexes and office and retail plazas in my district. The photos are available in the council files on this bill if the public wishes to go and view them. Easily 50 to 75% of what was in those dumpsters was recyclable or compostable. I cannot ask the people who already are largely doing the right thing by filling one or two of their recycle bins to pay up to $252 a year, while we are not mandating diversion from the 82% of the market that throws such enormous amounts of needless waste into the landfill. Instead, I advocate remove the fee we now charge for compost collection and delay consideration of charging for trash collection for at least a year to see the benefits of actually educating the public on what we want them to do. We've seen that cities with a high diversion rate have charges for residential trash, but correlation is not causation. There's no evidence that the fee is what's causing it. In fact, some of those cities, like Portland, mandate recycling of demolition and construction debris, and that's what's moving their needle. You could charge many of our households $100 a month, and they won't be able to divert much more. Only by mandating recycling of construction and demolition debris and diversion from commercial buildings and large multifamily residential can meaningfully make change. Finally, Madam President, I do not have great faith in the promise of a discount program for lower-income households. Many of my constituents are renters, and they live in Brentwood, Harvey Park, Bear Valley, and they live in single-family homes and small unit residential. And I know that we're geared up to do outreach to them. But too many of them, I believe, will fall into the cracks of the landlords who already provide the largest cart and will simply add $21 to the monthly rent. And this is in a city with rising rents. I worked last week with a retired city engineer to crunch some numbers based on the published figures of what goes into our landfill and Denver's greenhouse gas emissions. In 2020, solid waste produced only 2% of Denver's greenhouse gases. The city's residential customers contributed only 18% of that 2%. Fully 2/3 of Denver's greenhouse gases comes from buildings, and 30% comes from cars, buses, airplanes, and yes, trash collection trucks. My engineer friend calculated that if all those customers diverted their recyclable and compostable waste from the landfill, there would be a reduction in global greenhouse gas emissions of 5.5 10 billionths with a B of 1%. If global emissions were measured in the length of a football field, the reduction would be 2 10 millionths of 1 inch. That's a difference that cannot even be measured in the real world, only on paper. I cannot ask people who are struggling this year with 8.5% inflation, $5 a gallon gas, the prospect of higher utility bills through Xcel's upcoming time of day pricing, plus more fees potentially on the November ballot, to pay up to $252 a year for this. In committee, I said it feels like we're swatting a fly with a cannonball. After seeing these calculations, it feels like we're swatting a fly with a cannonball the size of the earth. So my vote tonight is with the struggling households of this city trying to maintain their affordability in the face of this year's extraordinary economic distress. And I ask my colleagues to consider this, and at least to think about delaying implementation of this program for a year. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Councilmember Flynn.